Well, good afternoon, or good evening, or maybe even good morning, depending on when you're watching this flipped video. This flipped video is the start of Chapter 3, Lesson 3, particular where this is going to be Part A, all about creating territories, specifically the territories of Oregon and Washington. And remember, this is an academic video, so don't be afraid to pause the video or rewind it if there's things in the video that you don't quite understand. Before we can actually talk about how Oregon and Washington territory began, we have to define what exactly is a territory. And to do that, I'm going to let my dear friend Mr. Mint take it away.
Thanks, Mr. Volkman. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a territory had a representative in Congress, but that representative could not vote on any laws or anything else in Congress. All they could do is try to persuade the senators or representatives to vote one way or another. So being a territory had its disadvantages because you really couldn't have any say in the laws that affected you as a nation, or affected you as a territory, I'm sorry. Also, in a territory, officials and judges were appointed by the president, and then they were approved by Congress. So people in territories couldn't even vote who was in charge of their territory. You could get a really guy who knew nothing about you. All right, Mr. Volkman, thanks for the segment. Take it away.
Thanks, Mr. Mint. Well, by the 1840s, thousands of people had moved into the Willamette Valley, which is right here on the map. Remember, that's where really good farmland was. James Polk, who was running for president, he actually wanted land all the way up to the 54th latitude. Right here is a 49th latitude. 54th would be way up here, about the center part of British Columbia. That's how far he wanted it to go because there were so many people moving in. Unfortunately, both the USA and Britain claimed the Oregon Territory as their own. Well, I gotta give some backgrounds before we talk about how they figured out who was going to own this vast area in the Pacific Northwest. There was a war in 1812 between Britain and the United States of America, and it centered around a lot of different things. One of the things had to do with when British naval forces captured American citizens and then forced them to join the British Navy. Americans didn't like that. That was just one of the things that went to war over. Anyways, at the end of this war, they had a treaty called the Treaty of Ghent in 1814. Now, this treaty resolved a lot of boundary issues in the eastern part of our country, but it didn't really resolve anything out west. However, they did agree to jointly occupy the Pacific Northwest. Well, the United States of America wanted to have the boundary from the 49th parallel all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So here's my map. Here's the 49th parallel. They wanted to go like that. Britain, on the other hand, wanted something a little different. They wanted on the 49th parallel as well, but as soon as it got here to the Columbia River, they wanted the boundary to follow the river to the Pacific Ocean. So there were some different ideas on who owned what. So again, they just decided that they'd all jointly occupy it. Now they did try to get together to resolve this issue, but they kept postponing it. They said, oh, we'll do it in a year. Oh, we'll do it in a year. Does that sound familiar? Like your mom and dad saying, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. And it never gets taken care of. Or maybe like you when you go, yeah, I'll take out the trash. I'll take out the trash. I'll clean my room. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Well, in the 1840s, the idea of manifest destiny was around, meaning that Americans wanted to spread their own culture, their beliefs throughout the country. So many more Americans are moving out west. And of course, this does cause problems between the British and the Americans arguing over various things. Well, finally, in 1846, they settled upon the 49th parallel being the actual border. And this was called the Treaty of Oregon. Now, the Senate ratified this treaty with 41 people voting yay and 14 people voting nay. I want you to take a moment. I'd like you to pause the video here in a sec, and I want you to think about, why would 14 people vote against this? I mean, they finally have a boundary, meaning the British are kicked out of this area and have to go up into the Canadian side. So why would they vote against it? Think about that for a second. The Treaty of Oregon came into being. We had this area where, again, a lot of people were moving in, and even before the Treaty of Oregon in, what was that date again? What was the date of the Treaty of Oregon? Yell it out loud so everyone can hear you. What is it? What, huh? Well, if you said 1846, you're right. Well, in 1843, there were so many Americans in this area that they actually asked the government to set up kind of a, not impromptu government, but they asked for a government to be put in for a little bit to kind of help out because there were so many people. But still, it was jointly held with the British. So anyways, moving on. Once the Treaty of Oregon came into being, they had to figure out, okay, we're going to let Oregon in as a territory, but should it be free or should it be slave? Well, many senators in the North, actually most, wanted Oregon Territory to be a free territory, meaning no slavery. Now, people in the South didn't like that because that would mean that there would be more power in Congress for those who wanted slavery, which meant there would be a greater chance for slavery to be abolished, which would utterly destroy and blow up the Southern economy. In the end, Oregon Territory became free, and in August 1848, Oregon Territory came into being with Salem, the capital. Salem is right here, by the way. Here's Portland. Here's Salem. Keep that in mind. This is really important about Salem. Well, shortly after this happened, people north of the Columbia River started getting a little upset. See, many people noticed that the Willamette Valley and Oregon City were getting too full in this area, too many people. So they went north of the Columbia River. And they soon realized that the capital, which maybe was about here, was too far away from them. And the territory of Oregon itself was way too big for only one territorial governor. So in 1852, they sent a petition to the government to ask for Washington, or at the time they called it Columbia, to be its own territory. And in 1853, Washington Territory came into being, named, of course, after our first president of the United States of America. So why the breakup? Well, capital is too far away, the territory was too big. Sounds kind of like a cheesy song, doesn't it? I won't sing. The first territorial governor of the United States of America was Isaac Stevens. Fun fact, Abraham Lincoln was actually asked to be it. He actually applied, Isaac Stevens that is, to be the territorial governor of this state. Now he was actually part of the engineering corps, so he had a lot of knowledge in engineering and in geology. With that in mind, he also had good foresight into the Transcontinental Railway, knowing that whichever area had that railroad come through it, so they can send stuff to Asia, that place would explode in the amount of wealth and power they had. So he actually lobbied Congress to be allowed to survey a northern route through Washington Territory for the railroad. And he left to do that in June 1853. He came back to begin his duties as governor in November 25th, 1853. He was also in charge of Indian affairs, and we'll talk a lot about that in Chapter 4 and how he dealt with the treaties with the natives. Thank you for watching this flip video. On Edmodo will be the questions for you to answer. Thank you and have a great evening, morning, or night.